I want to distinguish between us looking at a text and thinking that the text is espousing its content, and which may be the case, especially if it's inadvertent, but that's another topic, is what I'm saying. Here I'm talking about, okay, let's all sit down and pretend that we're all pretty decent people who are as wise to these issues as any one person can be, respectively. Right, with all that entails, bad and good. But we're going to sit down, and should that material be available in content for what we're playing, we're going to pick it up and we're actually going to use it for characterization, for plot fuel, for motivation, for development. We're just going to do that. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I guess actually what I was kind of thinking about is, which way do I like better?
Right.
To do that, there's always been something that's a little weird about having half race as, just in all ways a co-equal branch of any other race you might pick. It's, it just doesn't feel right somehow.
Right. The very fact that it's tagged as a half.
That you want to bring to the surface and you want to have play.
Right. Yeah, exactly. What's the point of what? It's like you were saying with the half orcs. Why not just call them orcs, right? If it's not going to be a big deal, right?
Yeah. So it's not like it's evil to do it. It's just, which way. I think I'm maybe thinking that it's better to have some more sophistication about it.
That's what I'm thinking too. I mean, that's why I like what Dark Earth and Promised Sands do.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they each do it differently, because Dark Earth says it's been going on and continues to go on enough so that we're really talking about populations and diversity of content. We're not going to talk about like how many parents. We're not going to get all Nazi-ist and say, well, okay, you have one grandparent, so therefore this, right? Instead, we're just going to say there's just simply enough bleed and overlap between the two populations that you get what you think of as a minority recognizable phenomenon that is culturally recognized for good or for ill, and that happens. And so the Dusters do that really, really well, because they actually distinguish between the offspring of a human and a Duster, and then what happens over the centuries and generations with what you're like if you're just part of that population that's had that kind of ongoing contribution. They actually distinguish between those. So I agree. I mean, what I'm really looking for is thought. Do we have thought in the setting, in the content, that even if, in some cases it jars me and I'm like, wait, what? And then other times I'm fascinated and I want to play that, because the author's brought in some thought. I feel like we as a group can respond to those thoughts, and I'd rather do that than not. I'd much rather play in a party with a half elf and a half orc than a party with an elf and a dwarf. I just would. No.
Either could be good, but I'd rather have that option available to me for sure. One of the ones I guess that's leaping to mind, that is I look at it and I go, what, and I'm not quite sure what to make it, or I'm most uncomfortable with, is when you have they can pass as
right. Well, you see, that's part of that's picking up on something that is an historical human issue.
Yeah.
And since it is a historical human issue, then at least it's fair game for being in there, skinned in a fantastical way, in my opinion. It doesn't mean I have to buy into the assumptions and the viewpoints that make it a cultural issue. But I'm not going to say that me as a modern human am so above all of that such things are just alien to my modern, intellectualized and scientificized, eyes.
It's the utterly casual and
right. It's phrased as normalized to the reader.
This is a thing you can do because it makes the game easier to play.
Right.
Rather than, this is actually something that we're going to confront or look at in it.
I agree. And the phrasing in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook is definitely in that realm of me kind of blinking and saying, wait a minute, did you say that like that's the way I should be looking at it? It definitely has that kind of prose.
Yeah.
Now, Are you guys familiar with the science fiction game from the late 80s called Justifiers?
I'm not.
Right.
I've seen you talk about it before. That's what I know about it.
Yeah. It's one of several. And I don't know if it was the first, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't. But it's one of several games in which the protagonists are genetically modified non-humans from Earth animal species to be anthropomorphic, who are sent off basically as expendable explorers / soldier, troops or agents into, wild planets to go and, claim them, pacify them, stuff like that. This one is particularly interesting because the publisher, without me having knowledge of this, direct knowledge, the publisher's reputation financially wasn't so great. The financing of the game, the payment of creative contributors, all sorts of things. He published several games, and it doesn't have a great reputation in role-playing history in terms of business practices. And the game itself is, I can say fairly, having played it, wretched. It is truly, abominably almost, difficult and unpleasant to play. Whereas the content is incredible. The betas, as they're called, have to buy back the cost of their own manufacture through generating as much value to the company as they can through their activities. So they're kept on a careful budget. They have to account for anything they spend, like every bit of ammunition, which only adds to their buyback value. At the same time as they're trying to get as much value out of the planet as they can for the company in order to pay to have their buyback. And this is actually calculated at the end of each adventure. And so they're trying to buy themselves out of slavery, basically, or indentured servitude to the extent that it is slavery. And they are, and the author is actually quite explicit about the freedom of the players to subvert and challenge this as they can. For example, the veterans of the human wars who are all cyborged up, their primary employment now back in civilian society is to hunt down escaped betas. So you have the cyborg slave catchers.
Yeah.
And so the author is actually quite blunt about what he's talking about. He makes no bones about it. I mean, this sucks. This is not cool. Your character, this isn't an excuse for you to be cool. This is shit. And you have to decide how you're going to deal with it. Are you going to be a good soldier, and they're very clear that when you go to a planet, you are screwing those native aliens over. You are taking their land. You are finding their resources. You are taking their stuff. You are cutting shitty deals with them. You are shooting their more charismatic leaders through the head. You are, you're being an asshole. And so what are you going to do? And any number of things in the source books of the settings make it very clear. Some of the old alphas who were cyborg animals are still around leading a resistance. And you have two things to concern yourself, which is why I'm bringing it up here. And they're very clear in the source books. One is gammas, offspring of betas and humans. Now, the betas are primarily their animal source, but the human DNA is used to alter them, and apparently that's enough to make them cross-fertile with humans. And so you end up with gammas who, interestingly enough, if the human parent is high enough status, they'll just simply raise them in human society and dare anybody to say different. But if they're not, then they get claimed, and if the beta is owned by the corporation still, that offspring is claimed by the corporation as another beta, effectively. So the Gammas are really stuck, right? Some of them are like celebrities. They grow up to be like singers and celebs and stuff like that. Very charismatic and cool, kind of a cheated out human kind of in appearance and very charismatic. Or you have another, a person chafing over being stuck with all these real betas in the company when I'm really human. That kind of thing is all there. And then you also have betas mating with other betas, but from different animal parents, from different animal sources. So those are called mutts. And you end up with, of course, interesting combos that way. So what you have is a developing and very explicit political firebomb developing, in the setting right under your nose, plus this angle on it. And it's really clear. The writing is crystal clear about it. It's very blunt. And it's probably the best treatment of race as such. Meaning the stuff we're referring to when that particular weird word is used.
Yep.
It's one of the best treatments I've ever seen in a role-playing game. It's just completely uncompromising, and he never hits a wrong note, is the best part about it. Oh man, it's a game from 1988, and you never saw evil corporations like these evil corporations. I mean, it is just picture-perfect RoboCop-style corporations. So that's probably my gold standard for the hybrid as genuine issue. In a way, it's cheating because it doesn't do anything fantastic with it. It just skins the real-world issues just so precisely. So maybe I'm kind of interested in some of the others where it's not quite as one-to-one a transfer. What were you talking about with Malanda again, Gordon?
So a couple of things in Malanda that I was talking about. One is that, one of the things that seems like a useful way of approaching these things is to look at the cultural angle more than the racial angle.
Right.
And, they're pretty clear. You can be just about any half-breed you want, but, mechanically, you're who you were raised by.
Right.
And that's, the be-all and end-all of it. I just... you talked about the sort of mutt nobility and
right. Yeah, that gets more into humans as such, and what does that mean relative to other races? But yeah,
that's not so much crossbreeding or a phenomenon of multi-ethnic, can we say that?
Well, in the case of some of the fantasy games I'm thinking of, it is. Humans are the ongoing outcome of like elves and orcs or something from time immemorial. But that's not very common.
Yeah, and that is kind of what happens in Malanda, and then the elder races withdraw.
Right.
And let it go forward from there. I think I said the one interesting exception is you can only have the Hobbit extremely lucky in all non-combat situations if you actually really are a pure breed Hobbit.
Right. There was a couple of purist, bits here and there, but not. Yeah, but for the most part, you could kind of gain them just by being raised there if you were Hobbit enough.
Yeah.